Good Tuesday morning, friends. The collect from this past Sunday. Give us grace so to follow your blessed saints in all virtuous and godly living, that we may come to those ineffable joys that you have prepared for those who truly love you. I just love the word ineffable. It is such an Episcopal word, right? It's a very appropriate collect as we just finished celebrating the Feast of All Saints' Day. But before we get to that, let's go back a week, shall we? You remember last week we talked about Zacchaeus, the tax collector who abused his position to make himself rich. I mean, really rich, as we said. Now, being rich was, of course, the ideal back then, and the culture would tell you that it still is today. And yet, as we learned, being rich didn't make Zacchaeus happy. He found that despite his wealth, he was unfulfilled and was searching for something. And then he decided to look for Jesus, and he found him, or should I say, Jesus found Zacchaeus. It was only when he experienced Jesus that Zacchaeus finally understood that it wasn't at all about being rich, and he gave away most of his wealth to the poor. Now this Sunday, we heard Jesus saying, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who are hungry now, for you will be filled. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh." If the idea in last week's gospel was that being rich is not the goal, well, this week, Jesus takes it a dramatic step further. Not only is it not your goal to be rich, but if you're poor, then you are indeed blessed. Blessed are the poor is a startling thing to say. The poor, well, they've existed throughout the ages. For there to be rich people, it would follow then that there must be poor as well. So if the goal was to become rich, then that's something you can get your mind around, right? Even last week's lesson telling us that the goal was not to become rich, though it is quite countercultural, is still something that we can kind of begin to grasp. But Jesus is now saying, "Blessed are the poor?" It reminds me a bit of a line from that musical Fiddler on the Roof. Tevye, the poor milkman, is talking to God and says, "I realize, of course, that it's no shame to be poor, but it's no great honor either." Well, with apologies to Tevye, Jesus is saying exactly the opposite. He's saying that it is an honor to be poor, and that if you are, well, then you are blessed. Blessed are the poor, blessed are the hungry, blessed are those who weep. These are not people who are accustomed to being honored, and I'm sure they certainly don't feel like they are blessed. The poor have always been, at best, pitied, at worst, despised. But Jesus is changing that social paradigm and telling everyone that the troubles one faces now are only temporary. Well, you say, how can that make any sense? Being poor is not really an accomplishment. It doesn't take a lot of effort or skill or certainly luck to be poor. Jesus makes it sound like it's something to be proud of or even to aspire to. I don't really think that's the point he's trying to make. Rather, I think Jesus is telling those who are poor that though it might be bad now, this is not all that they have to look forward to. Yes, they're poor now, and yes, they're hungry now, and yes, they weep now, but they will not do so forever. For as Christians, friends, we know that this life is not all that there is. Jesus then turns it around and says, "But woe to you who are rich, for you've received your consolation. Woe to you who are full now, for you will be hungry. Woe to you who are laughing now, for you will mourn and weep." So not only are the poor blessed, but the rich are cursed. This is revolutionary talk. It's no wonder that the authorities thought Jesus to be a rabble-rousing heretic. For what he is saying runs so contrary to the perception of the culture that it nearly defies comprehension. Jesus is saying that, one, being rich is not what you should strive for. That alone is a very unusual statement, as it seems to be the goal of the culture then and now. Two, he's saying, if you are poor, then you are blessed. Now, as I said, I don't know many poor people who feel like being poor is a blessing. So this too is a very remarkable statement. Three, not only is your goal not to be rich, but if you are rich, you're actually cursed. This is too much. This is, to the leaders of the time, this is inflammatory talk that would startle the rich people into wanting Jesus thrown into jail. The rulers, the authorities are almost always rich people. And Jesus just told them that they are cursed. Not exactly a way to make friends with the authorities. So, how do we make sense of all of this? And for you lectionary nerds out there, and I know you're watching, why do we always read this particular passage on All Saints' Day? Well, think for a moment about what it takes to be rich. Sure, there are a few lucky folks who hit a slot machine or win the lottery. Powerball's over $1 billion now. Remember, if any of you win it, church gets a 10% tithe. But most folks who are rich have gotten that way by putting all of their energy and attention on that goal. Their focus has been on themselves and on their ability to accumulate wealth. It is quite often their sole mission in life. Jesus is telling them and us that there is another way, a better way. We're to focus not on building up treasure on earth, but doing good here so that we can build up treasures in heaven. For while the rich are busy working to make their own life better here, Jesus is telling us that the poor, well, they're going to have their reward later. For we know as Christians, my friends, that this world is not the end. Rather, it's just the beginning. When we leave this world, we pass through the portal and exist in the heavenly place where we'll be able to worship God in the beauty of holiness for all time. The saints who have gone before us, many of whom we saw pictured in the church with us this week, they've done just that. They have slipped off this mortal coil and have traveled to that heavenly country where there's no suffering, no pain, no hunger. Each time we celebrate the Eucharist, we stand at God's table at the altar and we remember the sacrifice Jesus made for us. And as we stand there gathered together, if you look to one side, you can see the saints of old standing alongside us. Sorry, I got a call and I got myself messed up there. You can see the saints of old standing alongside us. For the saints, my friends, they never truly leave us. They live on in our memory and in the lessons that they have taught us. They become part of who we are. And it's not just St. Paul or St. Augustine who are with us, but it's Grandma, it's Uncle Fred, it's Mrs. Wilkins, who was our Sunday school teacher in 1974. The saints of God, those of old and those that we meet this very day, they have something in common. Their love of God and their willingness to follow the teachings of Jesus Christ. They also strove for the good things, not for themselves, but for others. They weren't rich in things, but in spirit. And in so doing, they came to know those ineffable joys that God prepared for those who truly love him.